First question, what do these people have in common? Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs. Okay, you might see a connection between these two. One more, back up. Michael Jordan. What do these three people have in common? Now that we know their three backgrounds. One a great physicist, one founded Apple, the third a great athlete. Notably, they were poor students. Steve Jobs, Albert Einstein, each kicked out of, I think, at least one school between them. Michael Jordan did not make his high school basketball team, if you can believe that. Hard to believe. There were students at Stanford University who had a technology that they tried to, as they do at Stanford these days. They pulled it together. They thought it's going to be worth a whole lot. They tried to sell it to Yahoo. They failed. They went ahead and founded a company called Google that is now over 9 times the value of Yahoo. There was a funny little company called Adeo. Maybe a few of you know a little bit about that. It was a podcasting company. It was a platform. It wasn't doing so well, and it particularly had a sense that its demise was near when Apple began launching its podcasting format, their platform, and they began to roll it out. And one of the founders there had a side project that really became a life raft, and that life raft became Twitter. So what did these 5 folks have in common? Not only did they see obstacles and experience in them, they kept at it, and they excelled. So what is it that we can learn about how they did that? Where can we go for inspiration to think about how we can then do the same? Well, from where I sit, I'm a venture capitalist. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I have a strong point of view that entrepreneurs are people that can teach us a lot about facing obstacles. These are people that deal with a huge number of them every single day. So when I think about obstacles, I'm all of 5'2". When I look at it, running hurdle, this is what I think of as an obstacle, because getting over one of those would be near impossible for me. And when I think about wanting to overcome obstacles, what I'm thinking about isn't just a specific task in front of me, but what skill set can I get that I can use in my everyday life? If I can learn to overcome obstacles, that should inform how I make my decisions about education, about my career, and about my life. But we all live in this incredible period of uncertainty. The pace of change around us is quickening all the time. The economy today is uncertain no matter where you live in the world. And if we don't adapt, we're not going to thrive. If you think about it, if you're looking for a job and you aren't conversant, let's say, in computer technology, it's probably going to be hard. And people my age didn't necessarily start their careers with any experience in school with computer technology. If I don't stay up to breast on computer technology, I won't be able to interact with my friends and my children. So we really needed to adapt in order to thrive. But the theme of today's conference isn't just how to overcome obstacles, it's how to embrace them. How do I think about how to harness something about an obstacle to make it good for me? That just seems completely counterintuitive. I come to my point of view about obstacles as a venture capitalist. I've been doing this the better part of 20 years. I've probably met thousands of entrepreneurs at this stage. We've backed over 100 of them. I became chairman of the National Venture Capital Association, which gave me a nationwide point of view about venture capital and entrepreneurs, and even an international perspective on that. I will say it is one of the most privileged occupations you can have, because in particular, its benefit is that you constantly get to learn. People that are really passionate and know a lot about various technologies come in, and in telling you about their story, you get this opportunity to learn. You also get to learn a lot about people. And I've become a huge student now and admirer of entrepreneurs. They also live in a huge world of uncertainty, in fact, one they've chosen almost for that reason. And I've come to really appreciate how different they are from most of us, but there are things that they do that I think we can take away. There are 3 that I've worked with that come to mind in particular. One is the fellow Josh James, the founder and CEO of Omniture. Another is Scott Dorsey, the founder and CEO of ExactTarget. And the third is Aaron Levy, the founder and CEO of Box. One's from Utah, one's from Indiana, one's from here. You couldn't pick 3 more different people. And they all started their companies in their proverbial dorm rooms or kitchens or garages. But they had common traits in terms of how they went about starting something with crazy odds in front of them. So let's think about the odds that they knew that they were going to be addressing. Failure. They knew, and it's common knowledge, that most startups fail. There are 2 different studies we can look at. One is one by University of Tennessee, done this year, that said 55% of startups fail in the first 5 years. Harvard, Professor Ghosh at Harvard did a study that said 75% fail. When you look at those odds, why would anybody choose a path where the likelihood of success is relatively low? Well, one of the issues, and one of the things I've observed in looking at entrepreneurs, is they think very differently about you and I when they look at those kinds of odds. They see failure as feedback. Think about that. You're approaching that obstacle. You're running up to that hurdle. Most of us either pull back from the hurdle, even as we're trying to go over it, we might be hesitant, or we blow right through it. They don't do either. They may run into it, and as they're running into it, they're getting feedback. They see that is an important asset for them. If I didn't clear that hurdle, what do I need to do next time to approach it in a different way? How do I need to be sure that my clearance is better? They actually see failure as feedback. And it's a phenomenal thing when you watch an entrepreneur go through this. They're incredibly optimistic people. When they tell you something is going to be a success, you're just thinking, really? And you're looking at a guy with a t-shirt on and jeans, and he's describing a future to you that and again, I've seen 3 entrepreneurs who did that and ultimately were able to build companies that were worth in the billions of dollars. And part of it is because they had this sort of unique perspective on how to look at things. And when I think about this, I turn to something then that they all spend a lot of time with these days. This is a very current way that entrepreneurs are thinking about building companies. I'm kind of looping you in on sort of a current big movement. It's called the Lean Startup. It was started in 2011 by both a founder and an investor named Eric Ries. He lives in Silicon Valley. He's very inspirational. I encourage you to look up his work. And it's followed by a lot of entrepreneurs these days because it informs how you might go about building a business in an efficient way. And there's a lot about what they do. And when I was reading it and thinking about discussing this topic today and looked at everything that they said and applied it to me as an individual and my life, it started to ring really true. One of the big tenets they have is fail fast and fail cheap. Well, if failure is feedback, that means get feedback fast and get feedback before you've invested too much of your time and your effort. So think about that as you're going into a personal endeavor. Think about building in a continuous feedback loop. Always be listening, always be thinking. Decide that that's part of the way you want to approach life. And then the real question is, what do they do with that feedback? This is famous in Silicon Valley these days. They pivot. And when I first heard this, and I think when most people think about pivoting, they're thinking about a radical change. They're thinking about going from right to left. They're thinking about going from one side of the world to another. Actually, observing entrepreneurs, when they pivot, it's very incremental. If they move even significantly, it's usually to an adjacent space. The founder of Box, Aaron Levy, you probably know the competitor, Dropbox. When he was building Box, he had great technology, but as they were competing with Dropbox, focusing on consumers, they could sort of see the taillights of Dropbox pulling away. When they evaluated what their strengths were, they realized they actually understood companies quite well, even more so, let's say, than individuals, particularly around things like privacy and security and sharing and all those kinds of things. So they pivoted. It wasn't a radical rechange. They didn't throw out their core code. They decided to take their strengths and apply it to a different market, and it's worked. And it's very interesting. Build on that expertise. Think about how we can apply it. Build on what you know. It's very valuable. And when you think about beginning, let's say, an educational career, a business career, a life direction, You don't have to know that today I'm here and I want to go there. What I need to do is just figure out the right quadrant, to just start in the right general direction. And in fact, often when I'm speaking to students that come and want to talk about careers, one of the things I tell them as a former photographer, so still a photographer with my iPhone, but one that less practiced, is keep your aperture wide open. Don't try to narrow yourself down to that single goal. Decide that you want to take on a quadrant, that you're going to get this continuous feedback, and you're going to find the space where both you excel and there's great opportunity. You don't want to go to an area where there are hundreds of other people just like you. You might want to go one over, or not everybody else is. So pivoting is an incredibly powerful thing to think about, and again, a real positive thing. So let's talk about entrepreneurs. What can we learn from them as people? One of the things about entrepreneurs is that they can keep two opposing goals in their mind at the same time. Entrepreneurs are both incredibly passionate, but dispassionate at the same time. And I think about all the pitches I've been in and I've heard, particularly for those that are successful. They really believe in what they're doing, and at the same point can tell you where the failure points might be, how they plan to measure it, and how to go forward. They're passionate, but they're dispassionate in terms of how they're going to lay out that process, how they're building that cycle of continuous feedback. And this is one that I think for me is particularly interesting. They are both optimistic yet realistic. This talks to me about a point of view about self-confidence, something that we all spend a lot of time developing over a course of one's career. You want to be optimistic. When I look at an entrepreneur, I want to be confident that you believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, why should I be hiring you? If you don't believe in yourself, why should I have you join my team? So you have to have a certain amount of self-confidence. But we all know what overconfidence looks like. It looks like cockiness. It looks like somebody who isn't going to be getting good feedback, who may not take risks in a smart way. But how you find that balance as you go forward in life is a real trick. This is where the art comes in. It's not a science. How do I show real confidence and yet also show that I'm realistic and open to feedback and change and learning? I know I will fail, and I know that will provide me feedback, and I'll get better, and I'm okay with that. And I'm confident about approaching that. So being able to hold this idea of being optimistic but realistic, I think, is really important. And the other thing about entrepreneurs is that they're fully committed. We talk a lot about balance. When you look at people who have really excelled, be it an athlete, be it an artist, be it an entrepreneur, they don't go halfway. They do what they do because they love it, and it's what they want to do if they had free time. They're fully committed to it. While you expect failure, while you expect feedback, while you expect to pivot and do different things, don't put your toe in the water. Don't decide that you're going to half commit and see what it's like. You've really got to get in and give it your all. But at the same point, again, you have to be willing to rethink. You have to be willing to pivot. So again, very contradictory kind of things, fully commit, but also be able to change direction. The last piece to me, this is about self-awareness. This is something that I think would be more valuable for all of us to think about earlier in our lives. And what do I mean by vertical or horizontal when I think about knowing yourself? It's really about a specialist, which is what you'd think of as vertical, or a generalist, which is what you'd think about as horizontal. A specialist would be a scientist, an athlete who's good at a certain project, an engineer who knows how to do, has a PhD and knows how to pursue a particular algorithm. A generalist would be a coach, a CEO, a leader in the community. You need both. One is not better than another. Often if you're one, you think, maybe I should have been another, maybe that's better, maybe that's more valuable. They're both valuable. And in particular, great leaders figure out what they are, so they pursue what they're good at, and they're comfortable with that, and they figure out how to complement themselves. If they're vertical, they understand that they benefit by having partners that are horizontal. When you think about somebody like Larry Page, the founder of Google, with Sergey Brin, obviously a deeply vertical guy. Engineering graduate from Stanford, came up with an incredible search algorithm that's Google today. When Google founded itself and became a big public company, they brought in Eric Schmidt to be their horizontal. Eric Schmidt, having come from Novell, had huge horizontal general leadership skills that really complemented what Larry and Sergey had. One of the things that Larry did in this process was also learn a lot from Eric Schmidt over time, who's now chairman of the company, and now Larry's CEO. My bet is he's still innately a vertical guy. I bet he has a lot of people around him, now perhaps as chairman and people underneath, who help him out in the horizontal. So you know what you are and you know how to complement it, and it doesn't mean you can't play every position, but you really need to think about and be self-aware about who you are. So when I think about this whole concept of embracing obstacles, I think this concept of failure as feedback, as an asset that you can take forward with you as you go through your life, pursuing so many different things, is really something for us to think about. And importantly, I think you should enjoy the process about achieving great things. And it's not just great things that are written in newspapers, it's great things every day that you experience with the people around you. It's the joys you get from a small discovery on the step to a large one. You should take time, enjoy getting the feedback, enjoy and celebrate the wins, and enjoy the people around you. Thank you.